Why does the planet closest to the Sun still remain a mystery? It would seem that Mercury should be thoroughly studied. It's nearby, it's small, and it's been visible from Earth for thousands of years. Ancient astronomers observed it without telescopes, and modern ones are equipped with technologies that were once unimaginable. But reality is stranger than expectations. Throughout human history, only a few spacecraft have managed to approach Mercury. So what makes this world so inaccessible? Scorching heat, extreme cold, and almost no atmosphere, these are just the surface of the problem. The real mystery lies in how difficult it is not to see Mercury, but to actually reach it and understand what it truly is. Mercury, a world of scorching heat, bitter cold, an extremely thin atmosphere, and massive craters. In past centuries, the tiny planet was actively studied by stargazers from Assyria, ancient Greece, Egypt, and China, as well as Indian and Arab astronomers. Mercury was first seen through a telescope by Galileo Galilei in the 17th century while observing the phases of Venus. Later, many scientists observed the object, including Pierre Gassendi, Giovanni Zuppi, John Bavis, and Agnes Rotter. Research continues even today, but now Earth spacecraft are orbiting Mercury, gathering information bit by bit. And yet at the moment, it is the least studied planet in the solar system. Let's try to figure out why. Sending a spacecraft to Mercury is too difficult a task, so only 2 probes have visited it, Mariner 10 and Messenger. Currently, no Earth spacecraft is capable of a direct flight to the planet without using multiple gravity assist maneuvers. To enter a highly elliptical orbit, the probe needs to decelerate sharply, but to approach Mercury's surface, it actually needs to accelerate. High-speed maneuvers consume rivers of fuel. That's why, throughout the history of space exploration, it hasn't been possible to send a large number of spacecraft to Mercury's vicinity. But those that have visited the planet's orbit have sent back to Earth many photographs and data that help us understand this strange world. Mariner 10 set out for Mercury in 1973. Interestingly, it was the last spacecraft of this series. The others were renamed Voyagers. For the first time, a small 500-kilogram probe equipped with solar panels flew past the tiny planet in March 1974, with its closest approach to Mercury being about 320 kilometers. In total, the spacecraft made 3 orbits around the celestial body despite its brief stay, and the probe sent quite a few images back to Earth. With their help, a map of 40% of the planet's surface was created. Humanity saw the 135-kilometer Boccaccio crater with a tall spire inside, examined a chaotic geological region of unknown origin believed to be the result of seismic activity, as well as an amazing crater within a crater. Hesiod plus Discovery. Mariner 10 was the first to discover that in terms of the number of craters, Mercury even surpasses the Moon. In addition to the deep scars left by asteroids, the planet is covered with cliffs 2 kilometers high. The probe revealed the virtual absence of an atmosphere, represented only by a faint helium haze. The temperature readings from Mercury, transmitted to Earth by a 20th century probe, differ significantly from current data. Back then, the temperature ranged from plus 180 degrees Celsius during the day to minus 183 degrees at night. Modern information indicates that daytime on Mercury is incredibly hot, reaching up to plus 500 degrees Celsius, while at night the temperature drops to minus 190. This means that the tiny planet has the most significant temperature fluctuations in the entire solar system. The next was the Messenger probe, sent by National Aeronautics and Space Administration in 2004. The spacecraft reached its target in March 2011, and it was equipped more seriously than its predecessor. The engineers tried to protect the probe from solar activity 11 times more than on Earth's orbit. The 1,000-kilogram spacecraft was wrapped in multi-layer thermal insulation material and covered with a sun shield. A special collector system was used to dissipate excess heat. The interplanetary spacecraft was packed with a variety of scientific research equipment: cameras for topographic and detailed imaging, spectrometers measuring X-rays, gamma rays, and high-energy particle indicators. An altimeter and a magnetometer were integrated into the body of the probe. On a January evening in 2008, after exhausting maneuvers and orbits, the probe Messenger flew close to Mercury for the first time, but only on March 18, 2011. Due to the difficulties described above, the interplanetary spacecraft entered a highly elliptical orbit, which took 6.5 years. Amazingly, the spacecraft sent to Pluto took only 3 years to get there. The probe's mission is to stay near the planet's surface for 2 Mercurian days. This means that Messenger has to orbit the celestial body for an Earth year. During its first flyby in 2008, the spacecraft sent valuable images back to Earth. For the first time, the side of the planet that had never been seen before was photographed. During the mission, up until Messenger's crash in 2015, more than 227,000 images of Mercury were taken. In 2010, the probe took a family portrait of the planets of the solar system. This is a kind of challenge that was started by Voyager in 1990. Messenger also recorded the largest Mercurian crater with a diameter of 1,550 kilometers and an age of 3.9 billion years, as well as the plane of heat. 11 years after its launch from Cape Canaveral, Messenger, having used up all its fuel and more than fulfilled its mission, crashed into Mercury near the Chang'e crater. Unfortunately, the moment of the crash was not recorded, since that side of the planet cannot be seen from Earth. But the main question facing the initiators of such expeditions is the possibility of colonizing the planet. Is this goal achievable? At the moment, the planet is lifeless. There is a theory that there is water ice on Mercury, and that it came from comets that periodically visit the celestial body. The vapor travels across the surface and settles at the bottom of polar craters that have never seen sunlight. If we don't take into account the complicated journey to Mercury, the same methods used for the Moon will be applied to its exploration. The presence of valuable resources and significant reserves of solar energy, substantial gravity, and a large core make the planet a possible outpost for humans in the future, at least at the level of orbital stations. When humans first began their journey on planet Earth, it's hard to imagine what feelings they experienced. This world turned out to be rich in food, without which one couldn't survive for long, but at the same time, it never fails to present surprises in the form of unpredictable dangers. Since ancient times, we have observed and adapted to life here. During the day, a small yellow orb in the sky warmed us, and at night, another celestial body lit our way. It seemed as if all of this was created by someone, especially for us. But over time, humans began to explore their place in this world more deeply. Their horizons expanded beyond Earth and even beyond the solar system. Then we realized that we are not the center of the universe at all. Only recently did we learn how vast the size and age of the universe are. It became clear that our planet is just a grain of sand among countless worlds orbiting their own suns in other galaxies. The Milky Way is just one of the galaxies in the local group, which is part of the Virgo supercluster, containing more than 30,000 galaxies. And there are thousands of such superclusters as well, and that's only in the part of the cosmos we can observe. Unfortunately, we don't know the exact size of the universe, but even what we've been lucky enough to discover is hard to comprehend. And the human brain simply isn't capable of fully grasping such scales yet. And another amazing fact is that we wouldn't exist if stars didn't explode and scatter the building blocks for life throughout the cosmos. But what worries us isn't so much the size of the universe, but rather the amount of time we have to study it. The most intriguing question is, how much time do I have left to live? Think about it. Even if you're lucky enough to spend 100 years in this world, you only have 5,200 weeks at your disposal. If you're already 25, then you have 3,900 weeks left. If you die at 70, then you only have 2,340 weeks. Time is running out for us, so what happens next? All the usual processes in your body will stop, and the further breakdown of your body will erase your personality, which is called informational death. Of course, we can't forget about the spiritual part, but we know almost nothing about it, especially about what might happen to it after death. Most likely, our life is all that we have, and once we're dead, we will remain dead forever. But if you think about it, the past 13+ billion years have passed by us unnoticed, which means you won't feel the billions of years after death either. According to one theory about the development of the universe, it will eventually die after a certain period of time, so you won't be the only one who's dead. All of this sounds pretty sad and scary, and this topic just gives you unpleasant goosebumps, so we suggest you consider a non-scientific and definitely subjective point of view that might shed a small ray of optimism. So, just understand us correctly, we don't know any more about human existence than you do. What does that mean? You have to admit it's doubtful that trillions upon trillions of stars came into existence just to make our sky incredibly beautiful. It's as if, almost mockingly, we were given intelligence, which allowed us to realize that humans are not the main characters in this picture. Think about it. If the universe comes to an end, then all our mistakes and bad deeds won't mean a thing. Even now, they only mean something within the boundaries we create ourselves. But in the end, the universe will free us from that. If our life is all we get to experience, then it's the only thing that truly matters. It's unlikely that anyone controls the universe, which means it shouldn't have rules or its own purpose. That means we can create them ourselves. And as long as humanity hasn't left the stage, we have the opportunity to truly live our lives. Don't forget to cherish every second. Explore the world around you and yourself. Enjoy art, communication, delicious food, and the beautiful nature of our planet. You shouldn't feel separate from the universe because we are an integral part of it. One that moreover can understand this and much more, that is capable of reasoning and making incredible discoveries that change lives. We still have so many questions. Are we alone in the universe? What are our creations and our soul? What is life? And are we even perceiving reality correctly? We are capable of finding answers. Our drive and curiosity will help us. After all, there are other worlds that we dream of visiting. This is our only chance and we must make the most of it. In January 2005, for the first time in history, humanity made a soft landing of a space probe in the outer solar system. We're talking about the Huygens probe, launched in 1997 together with the well-known Cassini orbital station. After about 7 years of traveling together to Saturn's giant system, Huygens separated from Cassini and began its independent flight to Titan. The images and some of the data sent by the probe turned out to be unexpected and amazed scientists. What exactly did Huygens see on Titan that was so surprising and mysterious? The eternal questions about our place in the universe and about life on other celestial bodies make people search for answers beyond Earth, especially after the initial disappointments in the search for Earth-like planets and the search for life on Mars. Scientists turned their attention to Titan, the largest moon of Saturn, which was first seen by Christian Huygens back in 1655. The unusually dense atmosphere of Titan, which seriously puzzled scientists, was discovered by the Voyager spacecraft as they flew past Saturn. It was this dense and mysterious atmosphere of the moon that became the main focus of the research. After a month of independent flight to Titan, Huygens began its descent to the surface. It took 2 hours and 28 minutes, but at the same time, the probe was collecting information, taking measurements, and photographing the surface of the moon. The parachute slightly slowed down the descent, and the craft hit the surface at a speed of about 4.5 meters per second. And although the landing was soft, the gravitational acceleration was 15 times greater than on Earth, which caused some instruments to experience temporary overloads. The barely detectable signal from the radio transmitter reached Earth only after 67 minutes. That's how long it took for the light radio waves to travel from Saturn to us. But all the information was transmitted by Huygens to Cassini, which then relayed it further to Earth. A total of more than 500 megabytes of valuable data was received during 147 minutes of flight and another 72 minutes from the surface. After that, all communication channels were cut off. The first images pleasantly surprised the scientists. They discovered familiar, recognizable landscapes on the distant satellite. Mountains, plains, rivers, lakes, pebbles, and clouds. The land surface is cut by winding channels in some places, and in some areas you can even see traces of rivers overflowing their banks. Is this world really so similar to Earth, just like on our own planet? The main component of Titan's atmosphere is nitrogen, followed by methane, and its rivers, lakes, and seas are made of methane and ethane. The same kind of rain falls here, and the temperature on Titan's surface is about minus 179 degrees, which means the ice doesn't melt here. Huygens recorded wind at an altitude of 9 to 16 kilometers, with a speed of about 26 kilometers per hour. Meanwhile, at an altitude of 80 kilometers, the atmosphere is completely calm, which so far has no explanation. The probe even recorded the sound of the wind during its descent to the surface of the moon. Externally, Titan, which looked so much like Earth as seen by Huygens, turned out to be completely unsuitable for the emergence of the form of life we know. But after studying all the data transmitted by Cassini and Huygens, many hypotheses emerged about the existence of methane-based forms of life. In addition, modeling shows that there may be enough organic substances on Titan to start chemical evolution. Research on Titan continues, and for now, the question of whether life exists there remains open. Let's hope that we will witness new discoveries related to this unusual moon. Strange things happen repeatedly without which we cannot imagine. The night sky. Which celestial body directly influences many processes occurring on our planet? Which Titan states are competing for leadership in exploring the surface and interior of this object? Of course, you guessed that we're going to talk about the moon. The presence of this satellite, as well as its possible absence from our sky, has a global impact or could have an impact on human activity. That's why a detailed study of the largest object closest to us is a top priority for giants like the United States and China. Here, we see the age-old struggle for supremacy and resources, two problems that have plagued humanity throughout its existence on Earth. But who will win this space race? Let's be honest, for now, China is in the lead, while National Aeronautics and Space Administration with its Artemis program is trailing sadly behind. So the moon. How exactly did it form, and when did it become our neighbor? There are three main hypotheses about how the moon appeared in our sky. The first says that the moon and Earth formed from a common protoplanetary cloud. The second claims that Earth, being the larger object, once captured the moon with its gravity and forced it to orbit around it. But the most popular hypothesis, supported by soil sample results and other research, is the giant impact or mega impact. This refers to an ancient collision between Earth and an object similar to it in size and dimensions, roughly the size of Mars. As a result of this catastrophic event, the moon was formed from the debris. What recent news from the scientific world has partially confirmed the latest theory? They are related to the activities of the Chinese Chang'e spacecraft. The tasks assigned to them are to study the surface and interior of the moon, since the project is part of China's global lunar program. Chang'e 3 delivered the U-2 lunar rover to the moon, and Chang'e 4 enabled the landing of the U-2 rover on the surface of the satellite. Chang'e 5 delivered lunar soil samples to Earth in 2020 for the first time since 1976. But Chang'e 6 did something unprecedented in the summer of 2024. It collected soil from the far side of the moon. In fact, there were quite a few exclusive events during this mission. For example, U-2 took the first ever close-up photo of the far side of our satellite in the history of space exploration. Since it's impossible to transmit data directly to Earth from this hemisphere because the moon is tidally locked and always faces us with the same side, China took care of solving this problem in advance. Back in 2018, an artificial relay satellite called Queqiao was placed at the Lagrange point between the Earth and the Moon. It is this satellite that successfully acts as an intermediary and transmits valuable information to the Chinese Deep Space Mission Control Center. By the way, the lunar rover U-2, even while in sleep mode, had to endure the harsh temperatures of the lunar night, when the instruments showed about minus 190 degrees Celsius. The rover is still on the far side of the moon and is moving across it extremely slowly, literally feeling its way along. While exploring the surface of our satellite, its turtle-like speed is explained by the characteristics of the soil, which are different from those on the visible side of the satellite. At the same time, the rover set a record for operational duration, as it worked on the moon for 340 Earth days. So, What did the spacecraft discover on the far side of the moon? The thing is, China is in no hurry to share important news or sensational discoveries with the world, partly because it doesn't want to help its main competitors in the race of the mission organized by National Aeronautics and Space Administration, called Artemis. However, some information still leaks into scientific journals like Science and Nature, and accordingly, onto media portals. At the moment, it is known that on the far side of the moon, the Chinese spacecraft discovered unusual and orthosite glass beads, which most likely have an impact origin. They were immediately called meteorite glass. Apparently, they appeared here as a result of asteroid impacts when the surface literally melted from the high temperatures caused by the collisions. YUYTU-2 also discovered olivine and orthopyroxene, which probably reached the surface from the moon's mantle. Under the conditions of impact, radiation levels on the surface of the satellite were measured. By the way, it also turned out for the first time that these parameters are almost twice as high as on the International Space Station and 200 times higher than on the surface of the Earth. A unique biological experiment was also conducted on board the lander. In a special container, there were seeds of potatoes, rapeseed, and other plants, as well as eggs and fruit flies. After the landing, the seeds were automatically watered, and later some of them sprouted, which became a biological sensation, since this was the first case of seeds sprouting on the surface of another celestial body. What discovery made by the Yutu-2 lunar rover caused the most public excitement? The most. A strange object that the rover noticed in December 2021, about 80 meters away from itself. It was a cube-shaped object of unknown purpose, but that only seemed to be the case from a distance. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a rock of an unusual shape. Most likely it broke off from something larger and was ejected from the depths of the crater. At the moment, Yutu-2 remains in the von Karman crater, continuing its observations and periodically going into hibernation when another lunar night falls. That's how China found itself ahead of the rest of the world and became the first to explore the far side of the moon, the most mysterious and unexplored part. What can be said about Chang'e 5? Where and when did the spacecraft named after the Chinese moon goddess land on the moon? On December 1, 2020, the returnable spacecraft successfully landed on a basalt plateau that is about 2 billion years old. Located in the ocean, this is the largest lunar mare on the visible side of the moon. The size of the ocean of storms is about 2,500 kilometers, and its area is about 4 million square kilometers. Chang'e 5 not only landed on the moon, but also collected more than 1 kilogram of lunar soil samples from the specified area and delivered them to Earth. The capsule landed in the wild steppes of China, in a region called Inner Mongolia, which surprised scientists when the results of the lunar soil sample research were partially released. The age of the rocks found on the basalt plateau was about 2.5 billion years. This is not surprising because the location is relatively young, but one fragment was much older. Its age is estimated at about 4.2 billion years. Its appearance here remains a mystery, as does the fact that among the glass beads in the form of small spheres, very young samples were found, whose age does not exceed 123 million years. This completely disproves the theory that volcanism on the moon stopped about 2.5 to 2.9 billion years ago. But why haven't we seen volcanic eruptions during visual observation of our satellite, since such events, even on a small scale, can be noticed through a telescope? The answer to this question is still unknown. In any case, this calls into question the current understanding of the satellite's geology and requires further research. What other sensational discoveries awaited the scientific community related to the mission's activities? A new phosphate mineral was found by Chang'e 5, the sixth element discovered by humans on the surface of the moon. Chinese scientists also extracted water from lunar soil samples. This happened during the heating of the material. Here, practical application of knowledge is involved, for example, in colonizing the moon or creating a transit base on it. If you can get 76 milliliters of water from 1 gram of lunar soil, then from 1 ton, you would get 76 liters of water, which would be enough for 50 astronauts for a whole day. This fundamentally changes the perception of the moon's dead surface and makes plans for its development more realistic. And finally, Chang'e 6. What was it about this spacecraft that managed to surprise humanity? First and foremost, it was the fact that, for the first time in history, it delivered 2 kilograms of soil from the far side of the moon to Earth, specifically from the Apollo crater. At the same time, the spacecraft deployed the national flag of CAESA on the surface. There had been no earthly symbols in that location before. Drawing on the experience of the previous automated station Chang'e 6, delivered soil samples to Earth on June 25, 2024, and once again to the same region, the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region. Preliminary results of the study of rocks from the far side of the moon are being covered very sparsely in the scientific press. In particular, it is noted that the soil at this location is more porous and loose, and that a lot of plagioclase was found in the sample. The mineral is considered igneous and is quite common in space. For example, it has been found on the asteroid Itokawa. Another important point is that the delivered soil contains extremely few rare earth elements of potassium and phosphorus, the so-called potassium K, rare earth elements, and phosphorus P. This fact significantly distinguishes this sample from those that were delivered by the Chang'e 5 probe and the Apollo mission. This is yet another piece of evidence of how different the visible and hidden hemispheres of the moon are in their physical and geological characteristics. It is worth noting, though not obvious, that such a difference, as well as the discovery of rocks similar to those on Earth, may be indirect evidence supporting the validity of the giant impact theory. But what about the main competitors, America and the Chinese space race? Unfortunately, the Artemis program hasn't had as much success as its Chinese counterparts. This research program was established in 2017 by the controversial politician Donald Trump. So far, only part of the Artemis 1 mission has been successfully completed. The unmanned Orion spacecraft, launched from Cape Kennedy in 2022, spent 25 days in space and traveled in the opposite direction for 3 days, relative to the moon's rotation, which is called a retrograde orbit. But Artemis 2 and the subsequent stages of this mission are in serious doubt. They planned a crewed flight of the same Orion spacecraft, followed by landing astronauts on the surface of the moon and launching the Lunar Gateway station. However, even if these plans are ever destined to come true, the Chinese are currently far ahead of their competitors, and the problem is not just the usual competition between countries. The thing is, if the Chinese People's Republic's unmanned spacecraft manage to discover valuable resources on the moon, it's quite possible that representatives of this country will monopolize the explored area of our satellite, not allowing anyone else access. There are particular concerns about the People's Republic of China's plans to reach the moon's south pole, where scientists predict there could be a large concentration of water ice. Read between the lines, a valuable resource, especially in the context of future colonization. As for America, so far, all it has are far-reaching plans. By 2030, a landing at the moon's south pole. By 2031, a crewed landing on the moon. By 2032, landing on the satellite with the delivery of a lunar cruiser, and so on. With the Artemis 10 mission, which involves astronauts staying on the surface of the moon for an extended period until 2035. What do you think? Is it possible to realize these ambitious plans? And who will be the first to achieve these goals? At least partially, considering the speed at which Chinese technology is advancing, as well as the enthusiasm, even fanaticism, of scientists from China, the answer to the question is obvious. Of course, you can't say that National Aeronautics and Space Administration is inactive. Anti-radiation vests, CubeSat launch vehicles, ultra-small artificial Earth satellites, and innovative types of lunar spacesuits are being developed. To sum up the interim results of the space race, the United States and China now share a common goal: who will be the first to reach the moon's south pole? What makes it remarkable is, first, the presence of water ice, and second, it is believed that there are craters of eternal darkness there, unique traps where matter remains in the early stages of the solar system's formation. Thirdly, an important aspect for future missions is the hypothetical peaks of eternal light, points on the moon's surface that allow equipment to be continuously powered by solar energy, even during the lunar night, because they never fall into shadow. Will the exploration of the moon, and being the first in this endeavor considering the scale of the players involved in the competition, affect the balance of power and the geopolitics of the world? Share your opinions in the comments. Well, Earthlings, this isn't the end of the video. We still have some very interesting and simply spectacular episodes ahead. But for me to keep delighting you with all the characters of the universe, I need your feedback. You can express it quite simply. All you need to do is give this video an electronic like, since we simply don't have any other kinds of likes, and continue the phrase, "I know." This way, you'll let me know that we're moving in the right direction. Stay tuned. See you next time.